that we think is really important that the evidence is pointing to is tailoring and being client-centered. People are much more highly adherent when you work on problems that are important to them. So that should be coming soon and to an AJOT near you. I don't know when, but that evidence, I know, Karen, you said you were looking for that, should be available for everybody to use.
Now, and forgive me if I missed this. What was your control group? What was the group of people you were working with for this research?
So this was a systematic review that we did of all evidence,
Oh,
and it was evidence provided that we didn't just limit it to OT evidence. We looked at evidence across the spectrum, so it could have been nurses or physical therapists providing home modifications, and the evidence clearly points to the fact that when OTs provide the intervention, it is more effective. So this is not one single study. But many studies that were included in the meta-analysis, or a systematic review, sorry, not a meta-analysis.
nice, nice.
So that evidence was then used to develop the home modification practice guideline, which is used for lots of reasons. AOTA puts it together to let mostly other practitioners know what occupational therapists can do, but it's also a guideline for OTs to use best practice in their own individual practices. So that best practice home modification practice guideline gives you the evidence that you're looking for, and it also then kind of serves as a communication tool. When people are deciding who should do the home modification, you can say, well, we know PTs and sometimes builders and sometimes nurses might claim they do home modifications, but in fact, for this outcome of interest, whether it's function or falls or caregiver, when OTs do it, it's actually more effective in this area for this reason. So that's what that's designed to give you.
Awesome.
Oh, I think we lost audio. There you go.
I lost audio on mine. Someone's sawing nearby. Wow. So you did find that, and how did you find those results? I know you said you did a systematic review of all literature. How did they measure that with the different disciplines?
So each study measured it differently. That it makes meta-analysis a lot easier when everybody uses the same outcome in the same way, and that's not true across home modification studies. So we couldn't look at it with a big meta-analytic approach and do calculations. We had to do a thematic, qualitative analysis. But no matter how you slice it, the themes were home modifications work. They worked. There's really strong evidence to suggest it improves function, and functions measured any different number of ways, from the COPM to ADL measures to the IHOPE measure that we've developed, different measures. It improves caregiver outcomes. If you look at Laura Gitlin's work and those trials demonstrate it improves caregiver outcomes. There are fewer trials to support caregiver outcomes, but I think that's just because fewer trials were done. It's not that there were negative outcomes. There's also very strong evidence, particularly from Europe and Australia, that home modifications reduce the rate and risk of falls, particularly for high-risk fallers. That's older adults, 70 and older, who have had one previous fall.
So do you think, did you read any studies about, I kind of feel like we know that we do good things, but I don't know if other people recognize that. For instance, people in their 70s.
People in their 70s don't want to admit that there's anything wrong. So that's a problem that we've had for a long time. So if you say, ask an older adult, how's it going at home? Are there any problems? 9 times out of 10, the older adult will tell you, oh, no, everything's just great at home. There are no problems. But if we go in and measure barriers after we get that response from older adults, we'll find an average of about 4 barriers. in the homes of older adults. So they underreport barriers. In some cases, it's because they don't want us to suggest to their children they should go to a nursing home. In some cases, though, it's that they don't even realize that these problems have occurred over time. So there's just been this kind of slow loss of function that they've experienced, and they've adapted slowly to it. In some cases, there's been deterioration of a home, or in some cases, the home was not designed initially to support their function, and you end up with a greater and greater mismatch. But they don't recognize that problem, and often they don't even realize what kinds of solutions we can put in place to support them. This is the reason that I quit using the COPM when I was doing assessments and we developed the iHope. We found that if we asked older adults, do you have trouble with laundry, and we show them a picture of laundry, they'll say, yeah, I don't really do it like I used to do it. But if we say, do you have anything you want to work on, they won't tell us laundry's a problem until we actually specifically ask them, do you have any difficulty with laundry?
Ah,
So we've switched to using the iHope because it gives us a better sense of a which problems people have, problems they didn't even realize they had, and then it gives us an opportunity to talk to them about potential strategies to improve their outcomes. So that's the trick, is identifying the problems with them. And then the next trick is using a client-centered kind of shared decision-making approach to let people know what the potential solutions are. And we like to say that we give people three choices for solving every problem. So if the problem is um, the toilet's too low and I can't get off the toilet very well, we usually give people the solution of a toilevator or a new taller toilet or a adaptive piece of equipment, and we talk about the benefits and liabilities of each one, and then the person gets to pick what works best for them, whether it's based on price or if it's based on aesthetics or whatever is important to them. And once we can get people to make one change, we usually are really successful in getting them to make the rest of the changes that they want. Once they realize it's their decision and their choice, we've had a lot better luck.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't done anything at all with the home with aging in place. But my friend called me to see go talk to her dad, who I know, and he said, "Oh, I'm so happy to talk to
Amanda,
you." And I
I'm
said,
just
"How have you
talking
been?" He
about
said,
her.
"I've been an invalid for the past six
I'm just
months." I
talking
said, "Well,
about
your
her.
daughter wants me to come over and take a look at your house." And he said, "No,
A
I'm
conference call.
fine.
Yep,
I got a
yep,
couple grab bars."
yep. Well, if it makes you feel any better, when my own grandfather needed home modifications, he wouldn't listen to me. So I called a home health agency and hired a home health OT to come over, and I met her in the parking lot, and I handed her the list of what I wanted her to say. And then she told my grandfather, and he did every single thing she said and thought she was brilliant. So sometimes when you're too close, they won't listen either.
So, do you have any? I mean, does anyone else have any questions? Because I can come up with lots.
I
Um,
just tuned in. Sorry.
What was that?
I just tuned in from Florida. I'm sorry. I was just listening. I just tuned in.
Oh, welcome.
I have questions just regarding how you market your services. Are you marketing to individuals or families of the potential clients?
so I'm not a business person, I'm a researcher. So it's really easy for me to market. I just ask anybody um, who qualifies to be in my study, and then I give them free home modifications, which is a much easier sell than trying to make it work as a business. So I don't have the business kind of background to answer that question, but I will say that we work with area agencies on aging and primary care physicians. Those are the folks that have identified older adults to participate in our studies.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. What being that you a home practice, what modalities do you mainly use in home for folks recovering from strokes? Just starting to get into home health practice, and you know, and I did different modalities within the clinic, but in terms of going out and bringing those services out to the home, Um,
So I think that only I don't really call it a modality, but the intervention that I
okay,
use,
intervention
and
is
I'm
fine.
pretty specialized, is really just home modification. So I use compensatory
Okay.
strategies to improve function, which may or may not be appropriate depending on the length of time since someone's stroke. The folks I generally work with are older adults with chronic conditions that aren't likely
Okay.
to get improved recovery. So I'm not focusing on limb recovery, for example. I'm more focused on maintaining and improving function, improving caregiver
Okay.
outcomes, and reducing falls.
Okay. Speaking of which, in terms of falls, what devices you mainly use, or what modification you use to help reduce falls, or help keep the patient safe at home from a multiple history of falls?
So we have a couple of things we like that we use pretty often, but we don't use a standard set of either techniques or modifications or devices. We tend to individually develop each person's program. So somebody might have a Roomba because they can't bend over and get their vacuum anymore. Somebody else might have an attendant that does their cleaning for them. Somebody else might move to an assisted living facility. It just really depends on the person and their level of function and what they need. So,
Okay.
and then we find that if I say we use a lot of grab bars, which we do, there's probably a million different types of grab bars, and we would choose the one that's right for that person and that situation given the construction of a home. So we always individualize each modification that we do.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that you do the research end of things and not the business end, but in your meetings with other therapists and people doing home mods, do you know if they have had any luck with any kind of reimbursement from insurance? Do you know anything from that end?
So yep, I know a lot about reimbursement. And again, I know a lot about reimbursement for older adults. So let me back that up. So Medicare will pay for occupational therapy assessment, and they will pay for occupational therapy treatment to improve function. So we wrote in the back of the home modification practice guide, and I am honest to God not a walking advertisement for AOTA, although it sounds like it today. We put together a CPT code guide for how we bill. We do have within our academic setting, we have a academic clinical practice, and so I used to run that clinical practice and bill Medicare for these services. And my best bit of advice for people doing home mods and billing Medicare is that you should remember that Medicare views assessment differently than occupational therapists do. So
Oh.
when I'm billing for an assessment, I only bill kind of what we call person factors or intrinsic factor assessments. That's that grip strength and range of motion, and that's the only thing I bill under the assessment code. Anytime I do an environmental assessment, I bill that under treatment code because that
Okay.
is Medicare views environmental assessments as treatment, not as assessment. So while it sounds counterintuitive, I swear I've checked this out with the billing people at AOTA, and we've done it ourselves in our own practice. It's not fraud, and I would never tell you to practice in a fraudulent way, but the guidelines that describe assessment don't include environmental assessment as part of that assessment code, which is a benefit because you can bill for every 15 minutes of treatment time, and that's how you can do your environmental evaluation under that treatment time. But assessments are billed for a set rate of $120 or something for an assessment, no matter how long it lasts. So make sure when you're providing this intervention that you're billing each element under the appropriate CPT code so you're not underselling yourself. Because the assumption is the assessment's going to take 20 to 30 minutes, not an hour and a half like we generally take when we do home modification assessments.
Okay.
So be careful. And the bad news is there's no reimbursement for home modification equipment or or mods. So the contractor's time and labor and materials are not included, nor are most durable medical pieces of equipment. So you want to make sure you'll have to work with social workers, and if you're in the hospital setting, we often work with reuse closets. Often people will pay out of pocket. Sometimes area agencies on aging will provide some funding for people. Sometimes disease-specific associations will do the same. So, for example, the MS Society or the Arthritis Foundation might provide equipment funding.
Nice. What was the name of that book that you were just talking about?
It's the home modification practice guideline.
And that's from AOTA?
Mm-hmm. They
You
have
know,
practice guidelines for lots of different areas, but there's one just for home modifications that we just updated, I think, last year.
Okay.
I remember reading something that Deborah had written in that. I can't remember. Deborah Young. I read something that she had written that she had updated. And I must not have read the whole thing. I must have just read the part that she had written. But maybe that wasn't even the same thing. I'm not real familiar with AOTA and what they do, to be honest with you. And I would really like to support them.
Yeah, I think AOTA definitely has some resources that will help you, whether it's the home modification network or some of these publications. I think those would be really great for you guys to connect with.
Yeah, maybe we should do a whole day of those sometime.
So there was a specialty conference last year also that AOTA had that was on home modifications and low vision. So that they might stay tuned. They might have another one of those coming up. That was nice because it was people that were really interested just in home modifications. So it was just nice to have all the OTs from around the country that just wanted to talk about home mods, because I think sometimes at AOTA you can get swallowed up.
Oh, yeah. They have quite a bit. So you said that you worked with primary care physicians, and they were the ones that were referring people to you, to your program.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's something that I think I don't work a lot with primary care. Does anybody else here work with primary care physicians as far as a referral source?
Um, I work in the skilled nursing environment. And of course, most of ours is through the primary care physicians in terms of referrals. And then, like she was saying earlier, we work through case managers to get the equipment that they need after discharge and whatnot.
Do you do many home med or home evaluations?
Yes, actually, when a patient before they return home, we give them the option of doing a home assessment before they return home. So before they go home and have home therapy, we go out and do uh, home evaluation or home assessment in terms of what the patient can and cannot do at home, and see if they're ready to return back home. Um, so yes.
Do people usually accept that? Do they usually want you to come and do the
So,
home evaluation?
actually, yes and then no. How it is in our area, we have in Tallahassee, Florida, uh, one facility is we do like a 10-mile radius, around the city, in terms of around a city borders, basically, in terms of offering them to do a home assessment. And what we do is we have a vehicle, either the families come and pick them up, which we prefer that better because we see how they actually transfer in out of the car and then return home and then do all the functional activities within the home setting. Um, but that's just like one assessment, in terms of before the return home.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So, do you find that doctors know about what we do and how it works as far as home mods? Or
Um,
have you had to do a lot of education?
uh, family education, but now talking about it, I guess you know I think if the OTs across the board, I know how it is in some cities, but if they were to do a better job of and especially particular for our area of our marketing, what we could do for returning back home. Today, focus on increasing function, of course, skilled nursing setting wise. But then that next transition is being able to take that and go home, and be able to do those activities at home. And then the last leg of what we provide in terms of doing a home assessment, we offer that for the patients, but not as great a deal as we should do with educating those physicians on what our transition process is. However, with that being said, just with the treatment along in terms of what's helping them to return back home, we have a great deal of now patient referrals from to
Hmm, okay.
I just have a question. The OT practice guidelines for the home modification sounds like a great referral sort of great reference.
Hmm.
So does it, I'm assuming it contains very specific fall prevention strategies, like very specific strategies that you use? And also I'm wondering, does it contain any sections on reimbursement, or is that more from, I forget what I wrote down. From Anyway, what is contained in that uh, home mod guideline?
So we don't give, we talk about big picture overview strategies. We don't say pick up throw rugs. We say do a task analysis, and we trust that you as an OT, we don't put that in the book. We know that you as an OT know to go in and notice that if somebody can't pick up their foot to walk over their throw rug, you're going to be a wise OT and suggest that they pick up their throw rug that's not taped down, or help them tape it down, whatever will work with the throw rug. But we don't give a list of, of strategies like that.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about task analysis, we talk about assessments, we talk about which elements to evaluate. But if you want, if you're interested in kind of specific assessments, I would kind of point you to the Westmead the fall prevention assessment, which I believe, if you're patient, Lindy Clemson, we've been working on a project to revise it, and I believe she's going to make it publicly available now that the copyright has ended for the original person that was printing that assessment. There's some great articles that are mentioned in the practice guide that talk about the fall prevention um, uh, studies that have been done, and some of those contain specifics. But really, the thing that makes OTs really good at this is they don't use a pre-specified list and check off a box to say we're going to do these 10 things in a home. That actually doesn't work, and physical therapists and nurses have tried to use those lists, and in fact their interventions are not as effective as the OT interventions. I want to point
oh,
to an article by a woman named Allison Pighills, who I just think is a terrific young researcher, and she wrote an article talking about the difference between nurses aides and occupational therapists. Nurses aides who knew a lot about their patients, and OTs, and how just having an OT come in one time and do an assessment is more effective than having a nurse's aide who's there pretty often try to do home modifications. So remember to just rely on those skills that you already have to evaluate person and environment fit, and that's what you need to do every time. There's no set list of how to fix every bathroom, and there's no set list of how to solve every fall prevention risk factor in a home. That's kind of your clever OT skill set to understand that. But reimbursement does include the section in the back. It's an appendix that discusses CPT codes and suggestions for how you might want to bill those to maximize the reimbursement rate you could get for a home modification intervention.
Nice.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like in itself, Susie, is just like the greatest information because I don't usually have to use those codes, but lately I've had a few cases where I have, and it's just been a struggle to get the reimbursement that I've needed. And so I
Mm.
actually hired a medical biller who does great for DME, but she doesn't is not doing well for getting the home evaluations reimbursed. So
Oh yeah, take a look at that. I mean, we've billed it through Medicare through our practice for about 10 years now, and we've had no trouble. You just have to make sure you're documenting carefully the problems that you're addressing, and so based on whatever your assessment is, whatever your functional problem is that you're working on, you document that functional problem, and then how that environmental strategy address that problem. That's just your treatment plan. But I find that has been eminently helpful and reimbursable.
I don't know about anyone else, but I would love to hear more about documentation to some degree. I guess a little bit of a wide topic area.
Yes, definitely.
And I've kind of told you what I know. I'm so specialized in what I do. That is, I mean, it's not rocket science. There, from that perspective, there's only like 5 CPT codes you can use. And if you want to take a look at that guide in the back, we had AOTA reviewed that, so it's been approved by AOTA. And I think that's the best I can do. There are probably people out there that know much more about billing and reimbursement than I do from multiple sources.
So when you do, like if you were to do a home evaluation and then you would bill it under, I don't remember what you said, but you talked about how you would bill it more as a therapy treatment. Um,
Yes.
Now, do you do the thing, like one thing I spend a lot of time on is design. And do you, and I can bill for that through car insurance and through workman's comp. I don't do any private, I try really hard not to do medical insurance. But is there any way of billing for that sort of work?
No, you can't, because that's not within the scope of OT practice design. You're working as the contractor at that point. So as the OT, you can consult with a designer about what the intervention should be, but that's like a family meeting. That's not actually, you have to look within the scope of OT practice to see what you can bill.
Well, like
Yeah,
for,
because you're wearing two hats.
yeah, but what about when I'm working with an architect and he's doing the design and I'm going through it and saying, this is what, this is what we need to do. I mean, what about that part? That's still considered more of a design than an OT sort of thing?
So I think if it's, especially if there's the participant is present and especially if a family member is present, you can talk about, but even as an OT, I can't bill for the time I go back to the office and talk to a physical therapist about
Yeah.
the treatment that we're going to do the next day. So that's kind of built into the cost of that CPT code, the assumption that you're acting as a professional. So number one, make sure you're acting within the scope of your practice because you have two roles and kind of sort that out. And then if you've got the person present or you've got the family member present and you can document it as education, if it truly is, then you can bill it under that code. But you can't just say, well, I've been working for 2 hours on this design, so you're gonna have to build that cost into the CPT codes that you can bill.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So after you do your the home mods, like one thing that I do with home mods is after we'll do the home mod, we'll do the design, we'll get it all done. And then afterwards we go in and we work on training. Do you do that as well?
Yes, I think that's a critical point, and I believe that that's treatment. That's part of treatment. Teaching people to safely use the modifications. That's really the heart and soul of what we do, right? Getting people independent in their daily activities. That is important, as is measuring outcomes and reevaluating and reassessing to make sure that person hit the target of their functional goals and what they wanted to be able to do.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? I should throw that out there.
If your mic's not working, you can type. I'm scrolling down. Does anybody have anything?
I do have one question.
Okay.
If I'm working doing the designs and as a coda, if an OT comes to me and says, you know, this is the situation and this is what I'm thinking about doing, and then I do a floor plan and put in all the modifications, is that billable?
So if the time that you're spending off doing a floor plan, no, that's probably under Medicare, that's not billable. Now, it might be under workers' comp or some other type of insurance, but under the scope of what you can get in a CPT code, we don't have a code that we can bill for drawing or using AutoCAD or anything like that.
Okay.
Susie, I have a couple of questions. One is, from the research that you've done, were you able to come up with sort of evidence-based conclusions indicating that for stroke survivors, changing their bathroom setup or adding this or taking that or using certain heights would decrease their risk of falls by 10%? Or something similar to spinal cord injured patients? And would you be able to share some more about the tools that you use? I know that you indicated that you have the Westmead, you indicated that there's the Copam, but what other tools do you recommend using for the actual assessments?
So I'll be honest, I use the iHope, but I developed it. So I sell it out of the back of a truck because the university owns it. I developed it, but they own it. And I wanted it to be available for therapists that were, especially therapists, working for small agencies that had to buy assessments themselves. So we use the iHope, and I used it for the reasons that I described, and that is that it's a way for older adults to identify better the problems that they have. We find that people will tell us about more problems if we have them. We have a stack of pictures of older adults performing different activities, and they sort them into piles of, I do this with no problem, I don't do it, I've never done it, I don't want to do it, I've given it up but I never want to do it again, I'm having some trouble, or I'm worried about doing it. And sometimes it's those pictures that get sorted into the worried about doing it that are the meat of my intervention. The things like I slipped in the shower and I'm worried about it, that's a cue that we need to install a grab bar. So we use the iHope, which is a glorified version of the COPM, which I dearly love. I love using client-centered approaches. And on top of that, I've just written down what really smart, really good occupational therapists do in their practice, which is they observe the person performing the activity in their home. They don't make assumptions in a clinic. They actually observe a person performing it, and they rate. It's a therapist rated assessment of how well a person is doing. So the person rates their own performance, and then the therapist rates their performance, and the therapist identifies the barriers to performance using the iHope. And that is the primary assessment that we use for home modifications, particularly when we're interested in function. When we're looking at falls, I use the Westmead Home Safety Assessment. I also really like the Home Fast, HOMEFAST. I don't think either assessments replace clinical reasoning, however. I think that's the best tool we have in our toolbox, is our ability to do task analysis and clinical reasoning. I actually sent a paper to Karen that she can share with you that was published in AJOT. We spent several years developing a clinical reasoning tool to help, especially novice therapists. So you guys are probably fine. You probably know all this, and you'll just say, yeah, duh. But we asked really smart home modification practitioners to tell us how they make decisions about home modifications. And so we interviewed lots of them over a couple of years, and they told us things like, well, we always start thinking about the type of disease a person has. Is it a disease that's kind of at a static state, they're never going to change, or is it a chronic progressive condition? Because that's going to, right off the bat, change the modifications that I recommend. And then they say, then we think about who else lives in the home. Is there a child? Is there a pet? Is there a spouse? Is there a caregiver? and what influence will they have on the home modification, and how do we need to make sure the home modification works for them? Because if we do something they don't want, then it's not going to stick, it won't last, they'll take it out. So there's a whole series of really great clinical reasoning tips that we've come up with that help therapists make decisions. Because as you guys all know, there are probably 500 different interventions you could use for every problem we come across. The heart and soul of what we do is we're able to narrow it down to the 5 best given that individual circumstances. So this article is really kind of describing what those individual circumstances are that home modification therapists think about and how they manage them when they're making recommendations. So that's another tool that I think we use pretty often. So the Westmead, Home Fast, the IHOPE are the assessments. We use the clinical reasoning tool. We use some strategies. We use motivational enhancement strategies, which I'm sure you've heard about, which are the, this is, for those of you who don't know, this is a therapy technique that was kind of begun in the drug addiction world. And it's the idea we don't tell people what to do. We let them come to their own decision about making choices and changes in their health behaviors. So it's a set of therapeutic strategies that all of our therapists use to help people make decisions about the best way to make home modifications in their home. So it helps people decide, yep, I guess I do need to increase the height of that toilet, or I guess I do need to add an extra handrail going down the stairs. But it's not the therapist imposing that on them, it's them learning about the options and then individually making their own decision that's best for them, and the therapist supporting them through that. So it's a little more influential than what we might have what we might have learned about with kind of the Ericksonian approach of letting people make their own decisions. It's a little more directed, it's a little more time savings for us, and we found motivational enhancement strategies to work really well. We also use a shared decision-making approach in that we feel our job is to educate people about what the options are that will work for them. So we have a technique, we identify 3 strategies to solve every problem that fit within the scheme of their own personal factors, and we let people make decisions about what they want to actually deploy in their own home. So it gives people a real sense of ownership, and compliance is very high in our work because people make the decisions. We don't make changes without them agreeing to the changes. I think that's a really important tool. We do a lot of self-management, teaching people to manage their own risks. We found that sometimes it's not the home modifications that we put in place, but it's the education that we do about how people can continue to modify their own homes that's probably more powerful than the one time that we stop and make their homes accessible. Once we give them the power and the tools and the know-how to either call us back or to make another tweak to the home modification as their function changed, we find that they are able to stick with it and be really effective over time. So that's the other thing that I think is really important. It's empowering people to make a goal, make a plan, try the plan out, check it, make sure it works, and if it doesn't work, try again. So those are I know it's just as, home modifications are just like any other therapy session. It's just really, it's our ability to look at a person's abilities, what the goals are, and what the environmental barriers are. In this case, we're just using kind of these compensatory strategies to overcome the functional loss. So in many cases, I think what we do is kind of more fun and easier and less intimidating for clients because the changes are immediate. You know, we can really change function almost overnight, and it's pretty powerful. There's my soapbox answer for you.
Thank you. That was thorough.
Oh, and your first question about have I demonstrated 10% reduced risk of falls? I wish. That would be terrific. I've not come across any fall prevention studies specifically looking at stroke. I know that fall risk increases after stroke, but I don't have any evidence that home modifications reduce that fall risk. I will tell you we have a small feasibility trial that we're piloting right now with individuals who immediately post-stroke. So stay tuned, and we hope we'll have more data for you on that later.
Excellent. Do you do any hands-on whenever you are there? If you are there for the actual home modifications, do you ever touch the patient to do any assessment, like a neuromuscular assessment or anything like that, or
Oh yeah,
balance?
yeah. We're just regular OTs. We evaluate the whole system: vision, hearing, range of motion, strength, sensation, audition, all of those things. We mobility, balance, all those things are evaluated because we don't think we can figure out which home modification will work unless we understand all those systems.
And you build that as part of the evaluation, or is that
Yes,
tough?
that is what I bill. All of those assessments I just described are what I bill as a evaluation. And then when I get to the home assessment piece or the IHOPE, I bill that as treatment.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate what you were saying, though, about how you get the person that you're working with to, you give them the options and you discuss them managing basically their risk factors and getting them more to buy into what you're doing. Because I do see that as a huge issue, like I was saying with that my friend's dad, or sometimes we'll go in and the insurance company will pay for grab bars, but the person won't allow us to put them in. You know,
Right.
there's just there's that other psychological factor to home mods, even if you know what to do, getting the person to accept it as well. And I'm looking forward. I'll share that with the group too. Really spending some time and looking through um, that PDF you sent over. So I think it would help
Yeah,
all of us.
I think that that is kind of those are like really great minds that helped us think through it. So I like that article. It took me forever to write, and but it was really fun to come up with the brilliance of all these great therapists that helped us. So that was really fun. I will say being client-centered has been is really hard when you know in your mind exactly what will happen if you put that magic grab bar in, but the person doesn't want to put a screw into their 1950s tile. I mean, that can completely tank your plan for a clean, smooth transit modification, and that takes a lot of work, and it takes building trust. So being able to come up with an alternative plan like a super pole, maybe sometimes putting things in the ceiling isn't as bad as putting something in the green avocado colored tile. And we sometimes it just takes asking about the aesthetics. I've had a modification that somebody needed. The woman was 92 and she joined a health club because she couldn't get into her bathtub. She had a jacuzzi tub, and we were going to pull it out for her as part of a study fully funded for her and put in a walk-in shower. And she rejected the intervention, and I couldn't figure out why. I mean, she was going to be able to shower in her own home, and it wasn't that she liked the jacuzzi. She never had planned to go in it again. But the surround for the jacuzzi was brass tone, and the one that I showed her was chrome. And she perceived that it wasn't going to match the rest of her bathroom. And so I paid extra for the brass tone surround to get her to buy into having the walk-in shower. And it was life-changing for her. But it was so important to her that that brass tone be there. I've had another woman that had literally, I'm not kidding, a robin's egg blue toilet, and I offered her a brand new comfort height toilet, and she didn't want it because it matched her robin's egg blue tub and her robin's egg blue sink. And they don't make that weird robin's egg blue anything anymore. So we tried to convince her to do a toilevator, and she refused the toilevator because the toilevator was white, and that was the only color that it came in at the time. So we actually had to go to an auto body shop and paint the toilevator robin's egg blue. But once we did that, she let us make the modification to her home. So we have to remember that homes are kind of these personal places, and all it takes is somebody to come in and move stuff on your desk for you to realize how territorial we are about the places that we live. So I figure it's our duty to kind of try to get to the bottom of it. And if it's an aesthetic reason, then there's usually some way that we can work around that somebody will come to an agreement on a home modification. So that's the challenge I always think with what we do.
I can see, Susie, that you are talking a lot about, I guess, what we all deal with, which is the PEO approach, that you're looking at the person's abilities, limitations, you're looking at the environment and the occupations that they wish to engage in order to facilitate their participation, so the environment is not bearing but facilitating to their function. And I think that's why we OTs do a good job in this field. My question to you, since you spoke about all these changes and that how you end up going above and beyond and to go to the body shop to paint the different items, how can you talk a little bit about the funding, and do you have to? It seems that you have a lot of funding on your hands available for you to do that stuff.
Uh, so,
And it's
so
not a big issue.
yeah, no, it's important. So I have funding from research grants. That's where I primarily get my funding. So, but I'm trying to be a careful steward because my next study, the one that we're proposing right now, is a cost effectiveness study. And I want the cost to be, I regularly have the costs come in at about $600 to $900 per person for older adults, frail older adults with chronic conditions. And while we as OTs gasp and we know that many of our clients can't afford those modifications, it's $10,000 to walk into the door of an emergency department. So my friends that I work with in the ED think that what we do is really cheap. So I always try to come at it with that perspective. I also know that that area agencies on aging generally have a budget of about $500 per person if people qualify for aging services and they can't afford home modifications. So I try to keep those ranges in mind. And those tend to be my budget limits when we're doing studies. With regard to the ridiculous amount of time that it takes to do blue toilevators, yes, that was kind of so those are more the exception than the rule. And I use it as a way to illustrate that we just have to ask the next question to figure out why somebody refuses this. And you know, we'd probably have to figure out a way to make this work. There will be therapists that will go to the body shop, and there will be therapists that will probably be smarter about it and have the family members take things to the body shop. So that's the trick. And I am also fortunate that I have amazing students that work in my lab that help me make sure we get the best modification to the client. So we probably spend a little more time and have a little more flexibility to figure these things out in the research stage. But we're trying to do it in a way that makes it implementable for therapists that are trying to make a living at this. So that's why we've put together some of the tools to hopefully save you money and time in the long run to do things a little bit faster than we've had to do, kind of figuring out the way. So I'll tell you to, you know, ask about aesthetics right up front so you don't waste your time with 3 different plans that somebody's going to reject because it's going to mar their tile that their husband, who's now deceased, kind of installed 20 years ago when they, you know, moved into the home. So those are the kinds of things that I hope to tell you to watch out for.
Sure, sure.
Good advice. That's such a huge issue to doing the home mods
Yes.
that maybe you don't think about.
So if you're interested in reading more, there's a great sociologist named Graham Rolls, Rowles, and he's a big fan of occupational therapists, and he talks a lot about the meaning of place and the meaning of home. And I think anybody that does this work would enjoy reading his work and how he talks about older adults and how deep the meaning of their place becomes, especially as they age.
Nice.
Yeah. So how do you see the role of OT evolving in this field, let's say 5 years from today? Do you see that there's going to be growth in the demand for OTs, or how what indicators are there out there that may help us move forward or may not be very optimistic?
Well, since I work in aging, I'm extremely optimistic, and I'm talking students into joining me all the time because when you think about the shifts in the demography of our country, you just have to. I tell people, imagine that the whole USA is going to be Florida by 2050. So we're going to live in a really different world, and not only are people living longer, but the longer you live, the more chronic conditions you're likely to have. The more chronic conditions you have, the more functional loss you're going to have. There aren't going to be only 4% of older adults live in long-term care facilities, and the rest of them live at home. Most people live at home in the same home they've lived in. Over 50% of older adults have lived in the same home for 25 years or more. So there's a huge market for home modifications. People are not going to be able to afford long-term care, and it's going to be really important that they make their home part of their long-term care plan. So I'm completely optimistic about it. I know older adults want to stay there, and I know it's possible for them to stay there. And I think our professions, there's evidence to suggest our profession's best at making that happen.
Do you have these numbers in one of your papers? I mean, that's fascinating stuff, and you said it so fast, I can't even, I mean, it's mind-blowing. So do you have it documented somewhere, or the numbers about percentage of people who are going to be living at home and who's not going to be able to afford long-term?
Well, so some of that I extrapolate from the cost of long-term care and how much people are saving. So it's my broad reading of the aging literature that I'm kind of stitching together. So if you look at, there's a really great public, I think it's called a housing, it's going to escape me, but Harvard has a housing studies kind of group, and they've done a really great, does anybody know what I'm talking about? They've done a really great report about housing projections, and some of that information I think would be there. Then I think if we talk about the 25, I think that's where I found that 25% live, or 25 years, the 50% live in housing for 25 years. That's where that number comes from. So I think that would actually be a great resource for housing.
Okay. Awesome.
Does anyone else have any questions? I have something that's on a different note, though. I've been working with Carroll University and developing like a living lab for their OT students. Do you have something like that at Washington?
So a living lab meaning like a ADL lab or a?
Yeah, it's basically a lab for students to practice home modifications and to practice what's the other word? And to practice ADLs. And so we're setting it up so that you can reconfigure it, and the students will be able to use different sorts of adaptive equipment, and that sort of thing. Do you have a lab I know I've seen a couple other labs. Grand Valley's got one similar. It's more of an ADL lab. But do you have
So we had an ADL lab and we never used it. So we've actually kind of demolished parts of it. I truly believe the best way to learn is in context myself.
Yep.
So we actually just have our students go into the homes of the older adults. I teach the home modification module for our students, and every student goes into an older adult's home and does an assessment. We actually train the older adults to be good patients, and we give them set problems to report that they have. But we actually believe in using the real world in our program. So we tend to do more real world stuff than simulated.
Nice.
So
it's cheaper too.
do your students study ADA guidelines, and what would be the best way that you think you introduce it to them?
Yes, our students learn the ADA guidelines. It has nothing to do with home modifications, though. But we do teach the students ADA. We have a whole course in environment, and so they learn community assessment. They learn a lot of other assessments besides ADA. But we teach them how to do we use something called the Community Health Environment Checklist that we developed at WashU to measure community building accessibility.
Nice.
So what other resources do you teach them to learn about the height and length of the ramp and the grab bars and all that standard stuff?
So I teach people how to use the tools that you can use to measure environment. So how to measure force, how to measure pressure, how to measure ambient lighting, coefficient of friction, etc. And then we show them the guidelines, but not very many OTs are going to use accessibility guidelines in their practice. We do teach them the community health environment kind of checklist because it's more practical and quick and easy. And they actually do things like go along audits. They do environmental assessments for our university where we give them portions of the ADA that they have to use to evaluate sections of buildings. Then they actually become part of our ADA plan. We also consult for businesses. We've consulted for places like the zoo as they've developed an accessibility map. We try to make it real service learning projects that they're involved with.
Nice.
That's good. Are you offering that class online?
Am I what?
Are you offering that class online?
I'm sorry, I can't get it. I think my...
Do you offer that class online?
Oh, do I offer the class online? No. I don't even teach. I only teach a portion of the class now. I've got more time with research than I do for teaching. So Jessica Dashner, actually one of my former students, is now teaching most of the course. It's pretty fun. So you'll have to come and take it with us.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, they didn't, when I was in school, we didn't have any home mod courses. And I hope that they're becoming more prevalent because I think OTs are really needed in this field, but there's not a lot of education unless you go, in my life experience, unless you go out and you research it yourself.
I think, yeah, I agree. And so one of my beliefs, and I think that one of the problems is AOTAs said this is a specialty area. I don't think it's a specialty area, and so I work really hard at putting out tools that can support any therapist in providing home assessments and home modifications, because I think any client that transitions from one facility to home really needs that kind of support. So while I do think that there's certain things that you might call a specialist for, like a complete renovation of a master bathroom or an addition, I certainly wouldn't recommend a therapist with no experience tackle that. I do think therapists should go into the home and see what the barriers are and help somebody address the barriers, or if it's too far beyond their abilities, make a referral to somebody that can. So I fully promote all OTs, and that's how I teach our students, is that every single OT should be able to do a home assessment when they leave our school.
So Susie, what are some of the, in your assessment, less tapped or untapped resources that could be referring more to OTs to do the home mods? I mean, you mentioned that you get some of your refers from the primary care physicians, but do you think that there are referring sources that should be tapped into and reach out to that OTs are not doing a good job reaching out to?
Well, I think geriatricians, I think social workers, I believe in geriatric team teams, and I think reaching out to the whole geriatric team is a important thing. I think even community agencies like AARP and some of the community engagement kind of agencies, like making sure they are aware of skills that OTs have. Um, I think some of our best friends are our physical therapy colleagues and our speech language pathology colleagues that know what we do and are willing to make referrals. I'm a community focused girl. I prefer to find older adults that haven't even hit the primary care scene yet. So I like working with places like the Area Agency on Aging to make sure all older adults are kind of screened for things like fall prevention. Is every older adult that needs a home modification kind of consult, have they received it? Probably no. But are we going to get it from just one practice? Probably not. So I like reaching out to those broad, far-reaching agencies like AAA's that can make referrals to us. I think that's been really effective.
Sounds good.
Do you think that some of those areas, because like we have the area agency on aging here, and it's the social workers who go out and decide what home modifications are necessary. And I frankly, I see that quite a bit. Do you think how how can we promote our profession more? I mean, even the VA, they don't in Michigan anyway. They don't actively have OTs.
The VA has OTs. The VA across the country has OTs. Now, and they know whether or not the OTs are doing the home assessments. I can't speak to that, but I know I worked at our VA, and that was something that I was really interested in pursuing. So VAs are a funky animal. They kind of, each regional VA has their own kind of culture. So it depends on the strength of the department and the profession within that VA to decide who does what. But and the VA is also funny because they give clinical privileges. They don't depend on the scope of practice of a profession. They're a little more old-fashioned, and so if you can do something, you can do something in the VA if you can demonstrate that you can do it. So if nurses are demonstrating they can do home modifications, then they'll be granted those clinical privileges within the VA system. So I guess I would point to the evidence, because the evidence is pretty clear that when OTs provide this type of intervention, it's more effective than when other professions do it. And it could be that social workers stepped up because there weren't enough occupational therapists to do what was needed. So there's part of a team training ethic that needs to go into letting people know what you can do and then negotiating to do it. There's not a ton of money in it. So when you work in the area agencies on aging, so not a lot of private practitioners have stepped up to meet that need. We do all of our work for free for our area agency on aging. So guess what? They give us lots of referrals because we don't charge anything.
Nice how that works. Hey, did you look in the chat box real quick? Somebody wrote you a note.
Oh, sure. What's it say? Help me out here.
I'm an Anna Jones.
I'm an adjunct University of Toledo. In one of our courses, the students visit the home of a professor and do a home evaluation where they have the freedom to practice and ask questions. That experience is followed with an assignment that involves completing a home assessment for someone in the community and developing a schematic of mods and recommendations. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Was that the question, or did I miss that?
No, I thought that's what. Just thought that was something you should see. I just read the.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. I fully agree that actually doing things in real world is much more effective than learning it on a piece of paper.
I have a question. I'm not sure if I missed this along the way, but when you do the assessment, do you have a particular formal write-up that you follow when you're writing up the assessment?
No, it's just a regular SOAP note that I've trained my therapist to use. I just try to always make sure it's all just following good documentation, making sure it's a functional problem, that focuses on occupational performance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And it's the Medicare, whatever the Medicare note number, 701 or 700 that I use. They probably don't even use those anymore. It's been so long since I've been managing that clinical practice.
So where can we access your research and resources? I've got her tool.
So I guess our papers are in the OT papers are mostly in AJOD and OTJR. I think the home modification systematic review will be really interesting to people, and so stay tuned to AJOT for that. The home modification practice guide is a really nice summary of a lot of our work. A lot of my work is summarized in that document, kind of in one place. I think mostly I publish, but we're talking a lot about maybe doing some continuing education. We've been working with Rebuilding Together, the therapists that volunteer for Rebuilding Together to help them bring the I-Hope to Rebuilding Together so they can measure outcomes before and after. So we've been trying to put together training sessions for Rebuilding Together therapists so they can use the assessments, and we teach them some of the clinical reasoning tools that I talked about. So that, if anybody's has a Rebuilding Together group that is interested in that, you can get in touch with us. And two of the therapists that we work with, Emily Somerville and Marian Keglevitz, are putting together a really nice online training for that group.
Nice.
Well, those are the places where we have. You can call us for the I-Hope if you're interested. Like I said, it's out of the back of our pickup truck, literally. Not literally, it's out of the back of our office, but we've been making those to sell if people are interested.
What's the phone number to call you?
Oh, let me just give you my email because that's the quickest way to get me.
Okay.
I'm putting it on the
Type it in
chat
the
box.
message box so everyone can see it.
Yep.
And then Katie also had a question too.
Katie, what's your question? Oh, the clinical reasoning tool is in AJOT, and actually Karen can send that to you because I just sent it to her.
Yeah, I will send that out to everyone.
Is a COTA that I hope is considered an assessment that one can be proved? Oh yes, I hire COTAs to work in my research group all the time, and they conduct the I-Hope. So I think COTAs can do that assessment for sure.
Well, especially if you're billing it as training, not as an evaluation. Because
Yes.
we've had a lot of discussion here. How can we get the codas so they can participate in this and bill for this as well?
Yes, absolutely.
There are quite a few codas that in this group are very active.
I think that's terrific. I hire COTAs. I've got a fieldwork setting now that has COTAs, and I think OTs and COTAs work great together in this. So the COTAs does everything but develop the treatment plan with us. They certainly have input in the treatment plan. They deliver the intervention. They do the components of the assessments. Absolutely.
That's a great piece of information.
Anything else I can help you guys with?
Anybody else have anything?
I just want to say thank you, Susie.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing that, talking to us.
No problem. Good luck, you guys.
Well, I have a question before you go, though.
Okay.
Are you going to be at AOTA this year?
Yes, I will be at AOTA this year.
Are you going to be a speaker as well, like last year?
Yes. I don't remember what I'm speaking about. I think actually, I do know. I do remember. So I'm doing a talk on one of our fall prevention interventions, and it's a talk that we have another meeting called the OT Summit. That's kind of a research focused talk, and so my home modification stuff will be embedded within a fall prevention session. Natalie Lelands is our chairperson, but I will be there, and it will be talking about home modifications to reduce, and it's actually kind of interesting. It's home modifications to improve function And then we weren't specifically looking at home hazards, but our hypothesis was if we address function, that will improve or will reduce falls. And the bottom line is it works for about 6 months. And then you have to have a booster session for really frail older adults. But it's really effective for 6 months. And then you have to go back in and do it again. Not the whole thing, but just kind of a booster. And I just sent you my correct email. The first one I wrote was incorrect. My cat is helping me type.
I know how that goes. I just had to go let my cat in. Well, a lot of us are hoping to be at the conference in Chicago, so I'm really looking forward to hearing that talk. Is there anybody who heads up? Is Karen Smith in charge of the home modification department of AOTA?
Yes, and that's not really a department. That's AOTA is kind of a. So the way AOTA works is Karen doesn't even work out of Bethesda. A lot of those therapists that work for AOTA actually commute in or telecommute. So Karen, that's just one hat that she wears is the home modification network. She also does geriatrics, and she's in charge of several other aspects of kind of intervention. So just FYI, that's just one small piece. There's actually not a home modification department, but she does manage the home modification provider list that I think you guys should all be part of.
Yeah, I do too. We're going to be looking into that, and I'll be reporting on that for our next meeting so that everybody knows. In fact, I'm going to see if I can get Karen to talk to us and just let us know what AOT has and how we can participate.
Good.
I think that would be great for all of us.
Good.
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then there's the home modification, or the community, home and community SIS, which has really got a pretty large subcomponent of home modification practitioners as part of that group. So that's a good group if you're picking your SIS, that would be a good one.
Yeah, I like that one. I'm on that one as well.
Good.
So, okay.
Good.
Well, thank you so much, Susie. It was wonderful having you. Very enlightening. I'm excited about this documentation stuff especially.
Well, good. Well, good luck to everyone, and I hope to see you in Chicago.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. And Jacqueline, thank everyone. We all owe both Susie and Monica Perlmutter to Jacqueline. She's the one who set us up with these speakers. So thank you so much, Jacqueline. Two great speakers.
Oh, no,
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
no problem at all. It's my
Thank you.
pleasure. You guys are welcome.
So if anybody else knows people, I've got a call out to Deb Lindstrom, and I'm going to have to call her again. And also, I want to get a hold of Karen. So Karen Smith. So we'll work on those two as well. We still need to work on our business plans as far as what we want to do with our vision. And I'm actually changing the vision on my business plan. I've decided over the past week or so, just in going sort of in a different direction, keeping what I've got and throwing some more stuff in. So that's one thing we all need to talk about. I'm probably going to send out some sort of a survey. We're going to be working on logos as well. And I just want to say real quick before we go, the name of this group is AIM Big, Accessibility, Independence, Modifications, Business Interest Group, which is not catchy at all. The AIM Big is, but the rest is not. And one thing I'd like to do is promote this group a little bit more. And I think it's hard to promote with the name that it's got right now. Somebody wrote something to me stating the National Occupational Therapy Home Modifications Business Group or something like that. And I thought that would be a whole lot better to use to promote this group. And, the more I think about it, the way I'm thinking is, like, for instance, when we do the logos, is putting kind of a business plan together for this group in general. I think there are a lot of people in the group who want to get started, but I'll tell you what, I find pulling all the different pieces to putting a business together is difficult. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking, maybe we could, and we had talked about this once before at one of our meetings about, what if we could make it so so people can kind of start doing work actually for this group. Um, like if this group had the billing, because for billing you have to have different contracts with different companies, and that's where it gets hard because everybody's got their own thing going. But setting up so people could get referrals and get paid through this group and as they got going with their own business. But the other nice thing would be if we had, and this is why I'm thinking it's got to have a different name. If we had called this group something like the National Association or International Association of Home Modification Therapists and had a really cool logo, that's something we could all put on our websites. And that could kind of add to our own credibility as well. And that would help too because for instance, in order to do a Medicaid waiver, you have to have a business. So if this National Association of Home Mod Occupational Therapist groups had the Medicaid waiver contract, then everybody in the group, could do the work in their area. And that's one less thing they got to set up for themselves. So I think, and Amy just wrote about getting support from AOTA would be great. I wholeheartedly agree. That's why I'd really like to get Karen in here. Does anybody else have any thoughts on this?
I think
Sounds
that's
like
a
a
great
great idea.
It's because I kind of started this group thinking I want OTs to be doing this. I'm tired of competing against builders. We're the ones who should be figuring out what's wrong and what needs to be fixed. But also, the reason I want that is to build my own business and to help other OTs build their businesses because we've got a great profession and I don't see OTs going out and stroking it the way it should, you know? So I don't know, I'm just trying to think of ways where we could all work together. And it's hard to get these subgroups going, but that's something I'd really like to see us working on a little bit more. Louie's been doing a great job. Nancy's helped me. Ellie has offered help, and I'm so taking you up on that, Ellie. Mahar. But I would really like to see this help us all reach our goals. And so that's what I'm thinking, and I'm probably going to be wanting to talk about that at later meetings as well, if that's something people are interested in.
I
I'm
love
very,
the idea.
yeah.
Okay, good. And then I'm going to send out another email too as far as logos. Please get your visions together of where you want to go and how you want to do it. And then I'm going to work on one for this community. And anybody who wants to work on it with me is more than welcome. I think that
Okay.
would be great. So we'll send out a few more emails and um, that was a great meeting. It was nice to hear from her, and I'm excited about looking at those billing codes because I'm kind of stuck on that right now. Medicaid is state specific. Oh, that's true. Um, we'll have to figure out how to make things work. So,
Oh, that's a good point.
yeah.
I like the idea of the larger group because for an individual just starting, it's nice to know that you're not just one individual. You have access to a lot of information and a lot of expertise, and I think that gives you more credibility as a small business.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. Plus, and this is just something from my own personal experience. Business is great. It's fun. It's a wild adventure. But it does take a lot of perseverance. Sometimes I feel like I just don't have the energy. For me right now, for functional homes, my husband's not working anymore, so functional homes has to replace his income, which was really a big income. And so it's been a little scary, but functional home seems to be jumping up to the plate, and we've been crazy busy, and we weren't ready for that growth. So for me, I'm getting, it's hard to keep going sometimes. It's just all about persevering. So I think all you guys are going to be going through that too, where you get to the point where you got to persevere. Yeah, I think we do need to look into the subcommittees again
Hmm.
and the best way to do that. So I'm gonna everybody send out messages to each other. Let's kickstart this because there's a lot of money to be made and it's a lot of fun, but it's easier to share the load and to work with each other and jump off each other.
I agree.
Do we all have each other's email? How is the group communicating with each other? I think I'm missing the boat on that.
You know what? I have a list of emails, but I don't have people's first names with the emails. I just have the emails when they've signed up on
Hmm.
my list. So I can export the whole list, or there's got to be an easier way to organize it. Does anybody have expertise as far as that goes? Because I've got signups, but it doesn't always sign up the way you think it would. Anybody know how to organize that sort of a list? Would
Would you do
anybody?
it for a spreadsheet or something?
Well, I can download it, but it doesn't have the names. It just
Yeah.
has email addresses. I kind of have had to guess whose email goes with what name. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's obvious, and sometimes there's no, you can't figure it out.
How
But
many names are you talking about?
I think there's 80 people on the list.
It's a lot.
Could do if we could do, Katie's suggesting private Facebook. We've got that LinkedIn.
Hmm.
We could do both. I don't know. What, what do you guys want to do? I, And I'll tell you what, I get busy. I have trouble staying on top of, I want to get things out to the group faster, but right now I am so overwhelmed, it's hard to just keep my head above water. So, um, but yeah, if we've got the LinkedIn, we could do Facebook.
I'm not sure, but does the LinkedIn have when you look at the members? I can't remember off the top of my head whether or not it has the names and the email addresses.
I think it's got names.
Just names?
It's got, I don't know what, for messaging, I'm not sure what messaging is. It does, you can do
Yeah.
like private messages.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering whether or not it had the email addresses.
I don't
Might
know.
have to check on that.
Well, um,
I mean, I
Vanessa?
could put it in a spreadsheet for you.
Well, I'll send you I can send everybody the list I have. I don't mind doing that. Is Because it would be nice if we could all, I was thinking about that the other day, if we could all make this work and talk to each other. So,
I don't know how to use LinkedIn too well. Sometimes I find I'm new to it essentially, and I go on, I find I'm connecting, like somehow I'm sending messages to everybody on my email list.
I
I
don't
find
like
it
that.
confusing, whereas I find Facebook, like a private group, pretty simple. You just label the group by whatever the name of the group is, and we just communicate that way. It just seems easier for me to use. I'm not the most high-tech person, but the LinkedIn, I find messages go out to people I don't even intend to send a message to or a connection to or whatever. I don't know what other people have experienced.
I'm okay with Facebook. I don't really use Facebook, so I don't know much about it. But I I just feel like whatever works. Does anybody want to, who knows more about Facebook than me, want to set something up? I mean, and see how that goes. We really do need a good way to communicate. We've got the two LinkedIn groups. I hate to like put all these different ways out there, but let's see what works. Okay, Katie. So do you want to do that and then just send me an email and I can like put it in a group email to everyone? All right, cool.
Yep.
That's great.
All right. Well, we got some plans going then, and then yeah, let's really start working on our groups and, like Mahar said, share the work because it would just make it better for all of us. So,
That sounds like a good idea.
okay, please work on your visions for what you're going to do, for where you want to go, because that's the only way we can, once you get your first part of your business plan down, then you can just take it from there. And it'd be nice if you're comfortable sharing with everyone, either through the monetizing home mods. I wouldn't put it in the OTs creating accessible homes because that group's got like 1,000 people in it now. But the monetizing home mods is only open to us in this group. So if you want to post something, post it there. Don't post it in the accessibility ones or in that Facebook group that Katie's putting together. Or send it to me, and if you're open to it, I'll send it out to everyone so we can all read about it. Whatever you feel comfortable with. But let's get those on the books. So have a great week, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
everything you
you.
do.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Okay.